Hello, parents and children. Naveen Badrinarayan this side, again taking you into a journey of life. And we are going to talk about a very interesting topic today, which is called how do we decide what I should be doing in this world? As you understand, we have been talking about non traditional learners. And when I'm talking about non traditional learners, I mean people who are not inclined towards academics. However, when we are deciding careers or we are working on careers, we have to look at the holistic picture. So here I'm going to present a complete picture of career research and how to go about selecting, what kind of work you need to do in this world. Now, what happens typically is when we use this word career, most of the parents start thinking about higher education. So career streams, careers are related to education, and that's an unfortunate problem, because if you understand our lives, career is your huge amount of work that you're going to do in your life, a lot of occupations, and it is not necessarily, while there is a correlation to the education that you do, higher education that you do, to what career it leads to, more or less all the research oriented or knowledge oriented or academic oriented careers have that linear correlation. However, the reality is very different. There is research to say that even 96% of IITians are doing non-technical work in the world today. So which shows that education is not necessarily the linear, has a linear correlation to what you're going to do your entire life. Having said that, so doesn't it make sense for us as parents, as mentors, as people who are into this industry, to help people understand what they're going to do, occupy themselves in the world before jumping into the higher education? That is the session that we are going to talk about in today's session. We're going to talk about this topic, and there is a particular methodology that we use in mentoring, where we try and connect the person's personality or nature to what that person would prefer to do in his entire lifetime. What happens is, we try to find out the problem areas in a child's, let's say, not scoring marks, not getting good understanding a subject, and we try to put pressure to them to understand the subject properly, send them for extra classes, and the parents try to sit with them and make them understand. Sometimes you're only solving the symptom, you're only giving the medicine for the symptom. You are not going to the root cause of the problem. So what happens is, this methodology of understanding the personality of a child, especially a teenager, is very important to understand what are the natural inclinations of the child. And then once we understand that, accordingly we can give direction to them. What is the direction that you're going to give to them? That is what is shown in the slide out here. So once we understand the personality using a psychometric tool, understanding it, validating it along with the mentor and with the parents, we sit together and we validate it, saying that okay, this is how his personality is. And that stamp is very important. And that's why you need a very valid, reliable tool. You cannot just sit on the internet and do some questionnaire and say I know myself. No. And getting a 100-page report or a 300-page report, all that is not important. What is important is how well do you understand yourself. Having read any report, you can get any report in the world, but having read any report, have you understood what is the personality like? What is that person like? There are too many factors. Correlating it could become a problem. That is where a mentor comes in, because the mentor has got the skill and the knowledge to be able to explain and make you understand what this personality is all about. And then that needs to be validated. It's not that the mentor knows everything about the child, but then the parents know everything about the child, and that conversation and that dialogue is so critical to set the framework, saying that okay, I've understood the person's nature, the personality is like this, these are the strong points in this personality, these are certain not so strong points, and these are certain weak points which we are not going to look at. We're going to focus only on the strong points. So that is the whole thing of the personality. Once we understand this personality, then what we do in Jivan Pravas is we try and understand, okay, what is this inclined towards? Is it inclined towards knowledge? When I say knowledge, means it's something which is more academically oriented. So since we are talking about non-traditional learners, we will keep that aside and we'll move on to the next part of it, which we say, can we look at the skill part of the world of work? Now, what happens is, now we are categorizing it separately. Why? Because if you look at the research that we have done in the entire world of work and doing the task demand analysis of every occupation, we understand that certain occupations require more amount of academic work. That means sitting down, doing research, theoretical work, writing a lot of documentation. So I'm saying more or less the time is spent doing this kind of work. Some occupations require people to work with their hands or do stuff, and that is occupying most of their time. Again, there is no purely knowledge oriented or skill oriented, there are overlaps, but predominantly it is knowledge oriented or skill oriented. So the word knowledge should not be a confusion to people. So that's why we have to understand the context in which I'm speaking. It is not that a skill doesn't need knowledge, that also needs knowledge, but the predominance of work with your hands, doing something with your hand, is what we are talking about. Similarly, there is a third category which is called behavior oriented or attitude oriented work. Again, it is predominance. It doesn't mean that a person who is doing behavior oriented work in the world does not need knowledge or skill. They would need that. But predominantly, the behavior is what is used in that occupation. For example, I'll give you a practical example. If there is a sales and marketing professional whose job is to ensure that something is sold and the numbers come in, this is able to make a business for the company. The predominant occupation of this person is completely based on his behavior, on his attitude, the way he's going to communicate, the way he's going to think, the way he's going to convince somebody, negotiate. So this is all related to the behavior. Yes, they would need some skill and some knowledge. That skill is again a communication skill, which is the soft skill, which it's an overlap. But the occupation of time in that work is predominantly governed by the behavior of the person. So I hope that clarification is very important, because you can't compartmentalize work into only knowledge or only skill or only behavior. That's not possible. We all know that. But when we categorize this work, it's very important. Why? Because it is not correct for us to put a very academically introverted or very oriented person who is very, very, silent and shy by nature into a role of, say, sales and marketing, or becoming a CEO of an organization to get business for the organization, whereas occupation of time is going to be doing stuff which is completely antithetical to the basic nature of the person. So that is why, because that is something that creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of mental problems, and that is the reason why alignment is very critical. So at the young age, if you are able to identify the nature, because generally the nature of a person does not change. Generally, there could be outliers, but most of the times the nature of a person doesn't change when it is formed into an adult. So that nature continues. People mature in life, they get wisdom, but the overall nature, the basic core nature, doesn't change. So what happens is, if we are able to categorize children, so we are able to actually tune into their frequency and harmonize with them and say, okay, I've understood you now, and we understand each other better, and therefore you are more preferable career areas, I would say, are more skill oriented or personality oriented. So that's the first step. Having done that, then within the skill areas or personality areas, as you see in the slide, there are different work areas or work orientations. Like for example, when we look at this, there is something like mechanical or technical, where you got to create. So you have these guys who are very good in robotics, or maybe we are looking at the future, so looking at drones or creating some stuff, or renewable energy, where you're actually working with the equipment and you're very good with the understanding equipment. The analytics are very good. You're able to observe things very well. You're able to work with your hands and solve problems. Now, those are areas, of course, that requires a knowledge, that requires certain academic qualifications, but the final work that the person is going to do is not going to be theoretical research. It's going to be practical. So the practical capability of this person has to be honed, and they have to build their profile according to that. There could be somebody else who is a research scientist in that area who does a lot of theoretical research, but this is completely different from the practical work. So that's why we have put it into the skill category, because predominance of time is going to be spent doing practical work. Similarly, we look at creative. Now, creative is something that I'll take a session on, because there is a lot of areas in creative which are all interspersed. There are different types of creativity. But however, creativity requires a person to be imaginative, to be very to be a creator of something, where he's able to visualize and create something for the future. So that is something that comes out in the cognitive abilities of the person, and be able to understand that okay, this person has got visual creativity, or this person has got hand creativity or physical creativity. There are different types of creativity, of course. So that's another area which again requires a person to be very skilled. So the whole development will change depending on what kind of work life you're going to get into, because then you have to get prepared to work in the world with your own hands and create something. So therefore your profile has to be created according to that. The degree or the qualification is just a start point, but what's more important is your portfolio, how you prepare yourself, how you do projects, how you develop yourself into that area. And the faster you start, the better it is for you. So that's why earlier we do this, the better it is. 13 years you start this work, so you're able to actually give them a headway of 5 to 6 years before they actually get into the education, higher education, or the world of work at all. So that is the second. And then there is, of course, the physical side of the world again, which requires you to develop yourself, whether it is sports or athletics, or the things where you're a commercial diver, or doing something which you use your own body to do stuff like an acrobat or a gymnast. So all these areas require you to develop yourself in that part. So the development is different. Similarly, if you look at the behavior part of it in this slide, it's very clear that we are talking about some people who are very good with people. I mean, they're very good with communication. They love to talk. They love to engage. So extroverted personalities who love to talk to people and mingle with people, and very witty, very enthusiastic, very charming. So if you look at these kind of people, they really do not need a very too much of an academic line. They need to start honing their skills and presenting things, being in front of audiences, attending events, being the master of ceremony of events, and all those kind of things. So development becomes different. Similarly, you have people who are some people are very aggressive, the backbenchers, especially in classrooms. If you look at the aggressive profiles, and they are very arrogant, and they are called arrogant. I would not use that word, very negative word, but then what we are saying is that this person has got the capability to confront. They are bold, they are brave, they are fearless. So these are the people who can actually negotiate, they can get deals done, they can ensure that work is done properly, they are good taskmasters. So if we channelize that energy of theirs in the right direction, so we get good leaders from them. So again, their leadership skills need to be honed, their development is going to be very different. Similarly, there are some people who are just, they love to follow processes, they're very systematic, they are rule followers, they're very they're not people who like to create something new, but they are very good at systematizing something, or just following the orders. And so these people work very well in processes in large companies. They're very good with administration. So we can identify people who have the tendencies, and they can actually build a great life of theirs, being happy in certain areas, maybe in the banking sector, maybe in the any kind of an industry, where their job is to be a team player, a good worker, a person who systematizes things and follows the processes to the core. So these are the people who do very well there. And then there are some people, which is again an interlap between processes, are services oriented, where their people are very empathetic, and they love to listen, and they love to solve problems, and they are like counselors kind of people, who are very good at social services, or personal services. So again, there are certain attributes in a person which come out in the personality assessment, which showcase that this person would be very happy in these kind of roles. So what happens is, if we are able to categorize these people at an early stage, we are able to actually get a win-win situation of understanding, okay, so I see myself as a great counselor, or I see myself as a great business person who is actually negotiating deals, or I see myself as a person who is actually talking to a lot of people and engaging people in events. So when this visualization happens in the mind of a teenager and child, a lot of clarity emerges, a lot of confusion gets removed, and therefore we are able to come to an agreement and give them a good direction in life. So I hope this small session of mine gives a macro understanding of how we can use the personality assessment and connect the dots with the world of work to enable decisions to be made which are a win-win situation for the entire life, and not only the higher education. Because once you decide what you're going to be occupying yourself doing in the life, then you can select an education according to that, and that's where the real interest would get excited. So this is the methodology that Jeevan Pravas follows to ensure that there is always a win-win situation when it comes to selecting something that you want to do for your entire life. And that's why we call it a life journey, and it is not just about a higher education or about a career entry. Thank you. I hope this was helpful.